Hey, what's up? I'm Tom.
And I'm James.
We're going to be breaking down everything that happened in the second round of the 2026 NBA playoffs.
Yeah, we're going to go matchup by matchup. We're going to discuss each series and how it went down.
If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and hit the subscribe button, as there will be plenty more videos along the way. So let's dive in.
Starting off with the Pistons versus the Cavs in the second round, after both of them overcame some more difficult than expected first round series. The Pistons survived the Magic despite being down 3-1, including being down 23 points in a must-win Game 6, coming back and winning that. The Cavs, on the other hand, defeated the Raptors in 7 games, despite the Raptors being down 2 starters the whole series and on paper just being the inferior team.
Series between Detroit and Cleveland started with Detroit making a statement at home. In Game 1, the Pistons snapped an NBA record-tying 12-game postseason losing streak against the Cavs. This drought dates back to the '07 Conference Finals. Duncan Robinson was big in this game, tallying 19 points, including 13 in the second half, while Tobias Harris added 20 of his own. Dennis Jenkins was also strong with 12 points, 7 boards, and 4 steals to help guide Detroit to victory.
For Cleveland, the warning signs were already popping up early on. Harden finished with 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists, but also notched 7 turnovers, and the Cavs as a team finished with 19 of them. It became a bit of a theme in this series. The Pistons guards were pressuring them, making Cleveland very uncomfortable getting into their offense. Dean Wade does deserve a Game 1 shout-out, though. He had the tough assignment of guarding Cade Cunningham in this one, and even though the box score impact doesn't really jump out, his defense was reasonable, and he would become a very crucial part of this series going forward.
Game 2 was more of the same, with Detroit able to protect home court once again and go up 2-0 over the Cavs. Cade finished with 25 points and 10 boards, while Harris once again stepped up as the second option to finish with 21 on good efficiency. Duncan Robinson and Dennis Jenkins once again added some good scoring as well, combining for 29 points. Duncan Robinson is an interesting player in this series. Detroit is so desperate to spread the floor and have a genuine shooter out there, with the departure of Beasley and Timmy Hardaway Jr. leaving them with fewer options this year. Robinson is a bit of a gamble. However, if his shot is falling, he provides excellent floor spacing and gives Cade a lot more room to operate, but undeniably giving up a fair bit on the other side of the floor, as he's not a strong defender and can cause many problems.
It's important to note in this game, the Cavs shot just 7 for 32 from three-point land, and in what ended up being a 10-point loss, it was probably the difference here. Spider did score 31, but the team overall struggled. Every Cavalier finished the game with a negative plus-minus, and at this point, Detroit has now won 5 straight games in the postseason since they were down 3-1 to Orlando. It's an amazing turnaround, momentum completely with the Pistons as we head to Game 3 in Cleveland. I don't know what it is with the start of games, Atkinson said. They came out super aggressive, of course, but it's the playoffs. Obviously, we haven't figured that one out. They're going to need to if the Cavs plan to challenge Detroit.
Game 3 shifted the entire series. Cade was able to notch a triple-double, finishing with 27, 10, and 10, but it was not a pretty game overall. 8 turnovers and 30% shooting illustrates his struggles despite being solid production. Dean Wade was the primary matchup and played him very well, although it would be Donovan Mitchell who, when switched onto Cade, held him to 1 for 7 shooting.
On the Cavs side of things, it was a Donovan Mitchell masterclass. He finished with 35 points and 10 rebounds on 54% shooting. The Cavs bench also added 28 points, which was very needed. Late in the game, it would actually be James Harden who would take over. With the game in the balance, Harden would hit a huge floater and then answer a Cade 3 with a step-back 3 of his own. That sequence would seal the game, and the Cavs reduce the series lead and get on the board. 2-1 series.
Game 4 was where the Cavs showed what they were capable of. Despite a quiet first half, scoring only 4 points, Donovan Mitchell would explode in the third and fourth, scoring an NBA postseason record 39 second-half points. Harden also chipped in perfectly with 24 and 11 assists, while Mobley had an undeniable impact with 17 points, 8 boards, 5 dimes, and 8 stocks, finishing with a plus 30 in the contest.
Detroit, on the other hand, got very little production from their starters. Karis LeVert and Paul Reed were excellent off the bench, combining for 39 points, but Duncan Robinson and Jenkins struggled badly, combining for just 6 points. Not enough production from those two. They need them to contribute more if they want to win the series. The Cavs even things up here at 2-2, steadying the ship as we head back to Detroit for a pivotal Game 5. Game 5 would become the most dramatic game of the series. Cade was brilliant with 39 points, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists, but again had 6 turnovers. Harden had 30, Strus had 20 on great efficiency, and Mobley and Allen both filled the stat sheet. Dennis Jenkins had 19 for Detroit.
But the big swing was late. Detroit had chances. Harris and Jenkins both missed crucial open threes, and Cleveland went on a 13-0 run from late in the fourth through to overtime. That completely flipped the game. Also, Detroit being without Duncan Robinson mattered. He has been a real distraction player in this series because Cleveland always has to account for his shooting. Without him, it felt like the Cavs could simplify their defense a bit more. Tobias Harris, who has been playing the role of a second scorer for Detroit, went 6 for 19 overall in this game. A real struggle for him. A poor game in what has overall been a really quality playoff run so far.
This game wouldn't finish without controversy. At the end of regulation, the Pistons would choke possession after possession away, multiple 24-second shot clock violations, 3 critical Cade Cunningham turnovers, before culminating in the most controversial play of the game. With just a few seconds remaining, Asar Thompson and Jarrett Allen pursued a loose ball flying out of bounds. It appeared as if Allen and Asar stepped on each other's feet, but the ref did not blow the whistle. With the game tied and both teams in the bonus, it would have ended the game with free throws if a call had been made. The NBA later on confirmed the call, stating that a no call was correct, as it was marginal contact initiated by both players. Detroit would be left to lament a terrible fourth quarter performance as they now face an uphill battle to the conference finals. Both teams move on to Game 6 back in Cleveland.
And then, just when it felt like Cleveland had control, Game 6 happened. Detroit went into Cleveland and won by 21. That was not what most people expected after the Cavs have just stolen Game 5, and were heading home with a chance to close it out. Robinson returned but came off the bench and still hit 4 threes. Paul Reed was excellent again with 17 points and 6 rebounds in only 16 minutes. And Asar Thompson had big defensive game with 4 steals and a block.
The Pistons also did a much better job on Mitchell and Harden. Mitchell had only 18 points on 6 for 20 shooting, and Harden had 8 turnovers. That is a massive problem for Cleveland. Harden has had some great moments in this series, but the turnovers just keep popping up. Against a team like Detroit, who want to get out and run and play physical, those live ball mistakes are killer.
The third quarter is where Game 6 really broke open. Detroit surged, Cleveland never punched back, and Mitchell basically admitted that afterwards, saying the starting lineup got hit in the mouth and did not respond. So now we get Game 7 in Detroit. And that leaves the big question. Can Cleveland Stars clean up the turnovers and handle the pressure on the road?
Before we head to Game 7, I think it's important to discuss Jalen Duren in this series. He hasn't really been mentioned so far, and that's not due to a mistake on our end. He's just been flat out underwhelming in this series, and overall played quite poorly in the playoffs at large. For this series, he's averaged just 10 points and 7 boards, and that's down from his 20 and 11 regular season averages. He just looks lost out there at times, and it's concerning for Detroit, who are desperate for any offense outside of Cade and Tobias Harris. Paul Reed is stealing all of the important crunch time big minutes now. It'll be a story to monitor in Game 7 and beyond, with Duren ready to sign a big money extension soon. So we head to Game 7 in Detroit. The winner takes it all. And after how tight this series had been, you'd expect a very even contest. Instead, Cleveland came in and absolutely buried them.
Yeah, this was not close. Cavs win 125-94, and Detroit's main guys just simply vanished. Cade had 13 on 5 from 16. Tobias Harris went 0 from 6. Duren only had 7 points. In Game 7 at home, that is simply a disaster.
And Cleveland did not even need some ridiculous Donovan Mitchell carry job to get it done. Mitchell did still have 26, but Jarrett Allen chipped in with 23, Mobley had 21 and 12, and Sam Merrill, of all players, came off the bench with 23 points and hitting 5 3-pointers. That's just brutal. When Sam Merrill is giving you that kind of punch, it's hard to lose a game.
Even Harden's box score is weird. He shot 2 for 10 and only had 9 points, but he had 6 assists, kept the turnovers down, and somehow finished with a plus 31. So he was not scoring, but Cleveland were functioning well offensively when he was out there and held up on defense as well.
Yeah, Detroit just looked cooked. They folded pretty early in the third quarter. Their body language was all off. They shot just 36% from the field in this one. They got smashed on the glass. And once Cleveland got some separation, there was really no fight. There was no threat of a comeback at any point. For a team that's fought hard all series and fought hard all playoffs, to fight back from down 3-1 in the last series, this was a really tough way to go out.
So Cleveland walked into Detroit for Game 7, won by 31, and will move on to the next round. Detroit had a decent run, but Game 7 was all Cavs. We move on to the next series to see who their opponent will be in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, so coming into Knicks vs. Sixers, both teams had really interesting first-round stories, but in completely different ways. For New York, their opening series had a few early scares, going down 2-1 through the first 3 games, and it looked like the Knicks might really be in for a difficult playoff run. There were a fair few questions about whether they could actually close teams out consistently, but after that, they found another gear. The Knicks started playing with real control on both sides of the ball, and by the time they reached this series, they looked like a team building some serious momentum.
Philly, on the other hand, came in off a huge first round comeback. They were down 3-1 against the favorite Boston Celtics and somehow managed to fight all the way back and win the series in Game 7. So even though New York were playing great basketball, you could not completely write off the Sixers. They had already shown they could survive pressure, win elimination games, and beat one of the strongest teams in the conference. But against the Knicks, it was a completely different story.
Yeah, this series was about as one-sided as it can get. New York handled business from start to finish, sweeping Philadelphia behind their star duo and a supporting cast that punished every mistake. We're not going to go too deep into each individual game here because honestly, the story of the series was pretty simple. The Knicks look sharper, they look deeper, more connected, and far more dangerous on both sides of the floor.
An absolute dismantling of the Sixers. Across the 4 games played in this series, the Knicks won by an average of 22.3 points and outscored Philly by 89 points overall. Complete dominance. For Philly, the biggest issue was the stagnant offense and slow-footed defense. There was a lot of isolation ball, not a whole lot of rhythm, and against this improved Knicks defense, it would not be enough to secure even a single win.
Tyrese Maxey struggled mightily in this series. He shot just 15% from 3 overall and averaged only 18 points per game. For a player of his level and going off of how well he played the Knicks in their first round series a few years ago, it's surprising to see him struggle so badly. It just simply wasn't good enough from the young All-Star. Maxey needed to be one of the main pressure points in this series for the New York defense, but the Knicks, and in particular Mikal Bridges, they did a great job at limiting his production.
And now we get to Joel Embiid. He played 3 of the 4 games, and just by looking at the end scorelines, you can see how much of a defensive liability he was in this series. He was slow-footed, could not contain Karl Anthony Towns at all, and was being torn apart by Brunson on pull-ups and floaters. And Philly opted for the drop coverage throughout large parts of this series. Not saying Embiid was Philly's biggest issue in this series, but the Knicks certainly looked to pick him apart and put him in a lot of action. He's not as mobile as he used to be, and it hurt them badly.
On the Knicks side of things, Brunson set the tone from the first game, getting to his spots without any real resistance and finding his mid-range rhythm pretty early on in games. Philly just didn't have the defensive personnel to contain him at all. Cat, on the other hand, despite some foul woes, was hyper efficient in his minutes during this series. His playmaking is just at an all-time level right now, and his role players are making what seems like every single shot off of his great passing.
The only concern for New York in this series would be the injury to OG Anunoby, who left late in Game 2 after putting together some brilliant two-way performances in the first 2 games. He would leave with a hamstring strain and not play in Games 3 or 4. Luckily for the Knicks, they have plenty of rest ahead of them due to the Cavs-Pistons series going to 7 games. They will be hoping Anunoby is fit and firing for the Eastern Conference Finals.
We also just have to quickly mention Josh Hart here. Every time it felt like Philly might even grab just a small bit of momentum throughout this series, Hart seemed to shut it down by himself with his hustle, his energy, his rebounding, and making those small winning plays that don't show up in the box score. He wasn't always at his best in this series, but he made the big hustle plays when it mattered most.
For Philly, this was a brutal exit. A sweep is bad enough, but the way it went down was concerning. They came into this one riding a high of a franchise-first 3-1 comeback to defeat Boston in Game 7, so there was every reason for fans to believe that they could make this one at least interesting. But against the Knicks, they just didn't even look likely to get a win on the board. Just a rough one overall. Their contract situation with PG and Embiid is not looking ideal over the next couple years. I don't know if they'll ever be a real threat in the playoffs with this core of players.
For the Knicks, though, this was a professional series win. No wasted games, no drama, and no letting an inconsistent Sixers team hang around for any longer than necessary. They came in and handled business, and they gave themselves the best possible result, getting some momentum, getting the sweep, and also getting that much-needed extra rest to see if Anunoby can be fit for the next round.
New York now moves on with confidence, and if OG can get healthy, they look dangerous. After 7 straight wins, the Knicks are rolling and ready for the Eastern Conference Finals.
Moving out west now, we go to the Thunder vs. Lakers series, and this was another sweep. But it didn't feel like the Knicks and Sixers series. This one was much more competitive throughout. The Lakers were actually matching the Thunder through a lot of the first halves in these games, but once the second half started, OKC kept finding another gear. The Thunder would let LA hang around early, and then after halftime, they'd just speed up the game, they'd tighten up their defense, and they'd slowly run away with it.
Yeah, and the scores tell that story pretty well. Game 1 was a strong Thunder win, 108-90. Game 2 was closer with OKC winning 125 to 107. Then in Game 3, the Thunder really broke it open with a 131 to 108 win. Game 4 was the closest one with OKC winning 115 to 110, but even then, it felt like the Thunder knew exactly how to close the door late.
Yeah, and the Lakers did have chances down the stretch in Game 4, but OKC looked really calm. They looked confident. They executed late. They didn't panic, and they choked out LA like a team that has been there before. I know they won the ring last year, but they're still such a young group, and it's really impressive to see them handle business like this.
For the Lakers, there are plenty of big questions coming out of this series. The first one is obvious. Was this LeBron's last game in LA? We're not saying it definitely was, but after getting swept and with the Lakers clearly pivoting to a Luka Doncic-centric future, it is fair to wonder what comes next.
Yeah, the other question on our minds is, would Luka have actually changed this series for LA? Because they did have moments where they looked competitive, but they just did not have enough reliable creation across all four quarters of the game. Once the Thunder pressure picked up, the Lakers' offense started to crack, and against a team as deep and athletic as OKC, you need more than a couple of steady options to stay afloat. Adding the season's scoring leader to the mix probably would have given the Lakers a genuine chance in this one.
And even when the Lakers played decent defense on Shea in a couple of the games, it was still not enough. That is what makes the Thunder so dangerous. You can make Shea work, you can slow him down in stretches, but the supporting cast is ridiculous. They have so many players who can defend, run, shoot, and punish mistakes. Over a full game, LA could just not control any of them.
Yeah, Chet was a massive part of that as well. His defensive presence in the paint and around the rim gave the Lakers so many problems all series. LA struggled to finish around the rim, and even when Chet wasn't blocking shots, he was changing them dramatically. That let the rest of the Thunder defense play a lot more aggressively and gamble on steals because they knew they had that protection behind them in Chet.
And that pressure really showed up in the Lakers' turnovers. Austin Reeves averaged 5.5 turnovers per game, Marcus Smart averaged 3.3, and LeBron averaged 3. That is 3 players averaging at least 3 turnovers a game. Against Oklahoma City, that is basically handing them 3 points in transition. The Thunder thrive on chaos. If you give them live ball turnovers, they turn them into fast breaks, open threes, and quick runs.
Austin Reeves had a really rough series. He had a couple poor games early on with efficiency and turnovers, but to be fair, doing anything consistently against this OKC defense is super difficult, and he clearly wasn't at his best and probably limited by his recent injury. On the other hand, Rui and LeBron were their most consistent players. Rui gave them good scoring and physicality throughout the series, and LeBron, as always, had a very strong performance. At 41, it's just baffling how great he still is and how well he performs. But there just wasn't enough talent to get it done here, unfortunately.
On the other side, OKC kept getting production from everywhere. AJ Mitchell was one of those big surprises. His offense was so good that people started throwing out those next Brunson type comparisons. Those comparisons might be a little premature, but he gave the Thunder a serious spark offensively and was arguably their most impactful player this series.
Jared McCain was another great piece for Oklahoma City off the bench. Getting only 15 minutes a game, he averaged 11.5 points on 58% shooting, and that's exactly the kind of bench production that just breaks a series open from the Thunder's perspective. The Lakers might survive a quiet stretch from Shea, but then someone like Jared McCain comes in, hits all his shots, and suddenly the lead just starts growing again.
There was also the free throw conversation after Game 2, where the Lakers had complaints about the whistle and the free throw differential. But then in Game 3, LA had 25 free throws to Oklahoma City's 10, and they still lost by 23. At that point, it is pretty hard to blame the officials. The Thunder were just better.
And now for Oklahoma City, the big question is whether this series sweep will give J-Dub enough time to recover before the Western Conference Finals. All reports say that he is ready to go for Game 1, so that's good news for them, because if he's healthy, this Thunder team is terrifying. They're deep, they defend, they have elite guard play, and they have Chet and J-Dub protecting the rim.
Let's head over to the last series in today's video to see who OKC will be matching up with.
So we're looking at the Spurs versus the Timberwolves now, and this was probably one of the most entertaining series of the round. This one had a bit of everything, with Minnesota stealing one on the road, San Antonio firing back, and a ridiculous defensive game from Wemby. Ant fighting throughout the whole series, fighting through injury, and both teams having moments where it looked like they were about to take control. So let's go through how it all unfolded.
Game 1 is where we have to start because Victor Wembanyama somehow owned the main talking point, even though the night did not end San Antonio's way. He finished with 11 points, 15 rebounds, 5 assists, and a playoff record 12 blocks. Gobert held him to 5 from 17 from the field, but defensively, Wemby was everywhere.
Yeah, he turned the paint into a no-go zone for the Timberwolves. Every drive felt rushed, every layup contested, and even the shots that he didn't block, which weren't that many, they were affected. There was a lot of controversy around this, though. A few of the blocks did look pretty close to goaltends, and I think a lot of Wolves fans would argue that there was contact, illegal contact on quite a few of them, but the impact was still ridiculous.
The flip side is that his fourth quarter offense was rough. He rushed shots, forced a weird putback attempt, and finished 0 for 8 from 3 for the night. Then down to on the final possession, the Spurs chose not to take a timeout. They still managed to get a semi-clean look, but Champagny could not convert. After all of that, Minnesota survived it and won 104 to 102. That was the warning sign. They slowed Wemby as a scorer, San Antonio shot poorly, and the Wolves still only won by 2.
Yeah, and game two backed that up straight away. The Spurs shoot 50% from the field, every starter scores in double digits, and Wemby had 19 and 15 while playing just 25 minutes. Minnesota looked really flat, and Chris Finch summed it up perfectly well after the game when he said they got punked. By the time it was done, the Spurs had won by 38 points.
At that point, it was clear Ant needed to move back into the starting lineup. Conley and Shannon were getting worn down, and Minnesota needed more creation from the jump. We move on to Game 3, but even with Ant in a bigger role, Game 3 became proper Wemby takeover. 39 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 blocks.
Yeah, that was the offensive explosion that everyone had been waiting for in this series. Minnesota tried Gobert for length, they tried Randall for strength, and McDaniels for disruption, but none of it worked. Ant was excellent with 32 points, 14 rebounds, and 6 assists. Nas added 18, 9, and 5, but the rest of the Wolves were just too inconsistent. Randall struggled yet again, McDaniels shot 5 for 22, and by the end of it, San Antonio had moved ahead in the series 2-1.
Game 4 gave Minnesota life again. The biggest moment in this game, and arguably the whole series, was Wemby's ejection. Early in the second quarter, he grabbed a rebound, felt like he was being held and being fouled multiple times, and he intentionally swung an elbow into Nas Reed's face. That got him thrown out, and it definitely changed the momentum of the game.
Yeah, and on the night in this game, the Spurs shoot 23% from 3, so it wasn't just the ejection that led to them losing this one, they just couldn't shoot. Ant dropped 36 on 59% shooting in his first game back as a starter. Nas was solid again, and Gobert gave them 11 points, 13 rebounds, and 6 of them being offensive boards. That pushed Minnesota to a 114 to 109 win and tied the series up at 2-all. But even in the win, you could see the Wolves starting to shorten the rotation because of injuries and the lack of depth. That can work for a night, but over a long series, it catches up.
Game 5 went back to San Antonio, and the league announced that Wemby would not face any further disciplinary action for his hit on Nas Reed. He would be suiting up and playing in this one. The Wolves tried to get under his skin early, but it did not work. Wemby came out with 27 points, 17 rebounds, and 3 blocks. Keldon Johnson also had his best game of the series with 21 points on 73% shooting, giving the Spurs a massive bench spark.
For Minnesota, Ayo Dosunmu was probably the only real bright spot in Game 5. He had 16 points and 9 boards. And for a moment there, it did feel like he might give them another one of those series-saving games that he produced in the first round against Denver. But one decent performance was never going to be enough against the Spurs team that had fully settled in now. By the end of Game 5, San Antonio had won by 29, and they stole all the momentum away.
Then Game 6 became the Stephon Castle game. We're already seen Wemby take over, Harper give strong minutes, and the Spurs depth show up, so it felt right that Castle got his big moment. He finished with 32 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists, and the San Antonio Spurs took complete control from there.
Yeah, that game summed up the difference between the two teams. Every Spurs starter scored in double digits again. Champagny had 18, and then Harper off the bench had 15 on 75% shooting, and San Antonio played 15 players in this game with almost all of them scoring. Minnesota had Ant and Nas fighting until the end, but San Antonio just had waves of players.
Across the series, the Spurs' young core was the story. Castle averaged 26 and 6, Wemby averaged 20, 12, and 4 blocks. Harper gave them 15 and 6 on 57% shooting and only 25 minutes per game. That is some great playoff production from such a young core group.
Yeah, and for the Wolves, Ant still did what he could do, averaging 24 points on 47% shooting, playing through injury. Nas Reed was really solid with 14 and 8, but it was Randall who struggled really badly, and the supporting cast was just too inconsistent for the Timberwolves. To go further into the Randall thing, his series averages leveled out to 13 points on 34% from the field, 19% from 3, and adding 3 turnovers a game. Just a putrid series from him, and one that's going to have the Wolves questioning with what to do with him in the offseason. You can't have Ant's co-star putting up those sort of numbers.
Ayo Dosunmu also struggled in this series after an incredible round 1 performance against the Nuggets. 9 points on 36% field goal and 28% from 3 really hurt them, as they were desperate for any offense outside of Reed and Edwards.
We should also give a big shout out to Joe Ingles. After this one, he is retiring from the NBA after a great career with the Jazz, the Bucks, the Magic, and finally the Wolves. He's going to head back to Australia to play in the NBL with Melbourne United. A really great career for Jingles, and we're super excited personally to see him play his final few years of basketball back in Australia.
For Minnesota, the ending to this series was worrying. Ant knew Game 6 was done with about 8 minutes left. He went over to dap up the Spurs bench and then sat out for the rest of the night. That makes you wonder where his head is at and what the Wolves would do next. Realistically, this was a 5-game series that blew out to 6 games due to the Wemby ejection. They were largely uncompetitive and the result felt inevitable.
So after all that, San Antonio closed it out in 6. They had 3 blowout wins, different players stepped up across the series, and the young core looked built for some serious playoff basketball.
Spurs advance, Wolves go home with real questions, and San Antonio now get the biggest test of their run, Thunder vs Spurs in the Western Conference Finals.
So round 2 is wrapped up, and that's going to do it for today's video.
The conference finals look super exciting with the Knicks vs Cavs out east and the Thunder vs Spurs out west.
We're going to be back to cover it all, so make sure to subscribe and like the video.
See you on the next one.